This is a story about how space brings us closer together, about how our natural curiosity leads us to explore, which leads to discovery, to new perspectives, and greater understanding. In 1948, Sir Fred Hoyle, an English astronomer, said, "Once a photo of the Earth taken from outside is available, an idea as powerful as any in history will be let loose." This image, taken by Bill Anders 20 years later, when Apollo 8 took astronauts and humanity to the moon for the first time, is one of the most iconic images of the 20th century and forever changed the world. Anders said, "It's ironic that we went to study the moon and instead discovered the Earth." This image had a huge societal impact and arguably kickstarted the environmental movement. In fact, a year later, we celebrated the first Earth Day. Now, it's one thing to see these images, and it's a very different thing to experience it for yourself, apparently. In my line of work, I meet a lot of astronauts, and there's a common theme, the overview effect. This refers to the perspective gained by going to space. It's a cognitive shift in awareness that comes to you from seeing the Earth as it truly is, a fragile ball of life hanging in the void, protected and nourished by a paper-thin atmosphere. From space, national boundaries vanish. The conflicts that divide us become less important, and the need to create a planetary society with a united will to protect this pale blue dot becomes both obvious and imperative. Shuttle astronaut Nicole Stott said, "I don't know how you can come back and in some way not be changed." With that said, only about 550 people have ever been to space. But as you can see, there are a number of new privately funded ventures that will take you and I to orbit in the very near future. But why is this important? Well, just imagine if instead of a few hundred people, millions of people, including senators and congressmen, were to go to space and come back with this new perspective, with this awareness of the fragility of our planet, of the injustices that we intolerate. Imagine how we'll approach conservation, environmental protection, or poverty alleviation, any of the other UN Sustainable Development Goals. Now, I know a lot of you are probably thinking that this sounds great, but who has that kind of money to be able to go to space? And that's a valid concern, considering that at the moment, the only published price is $250,000. But we can look to the airline industry, which developed in much the same way. In 1914, the first commercial passenger paid $400 for a novelty flight to fly 21 miles down a river in Florida. And that's about 3 months of wages at the time. The world's first airliner carried just 10 passengers, mostly wealthy celebrities. It wasn't until 40 years later that the first tourist or coach class was developed. And shortly thereafter, the first wide-body jet for mass transit. And we're in a similar place with spaceflight today, but with the added bonus that information spreads and technology develops much more quickly today. And for those of you who grew up thinking that by the time we were adults, that there would be a Starfleet Academy and we would be exploring the universe in Starship Enterprise or the Millennium Falcon, well, that reality is a lot closer than you probably think. These are truly extraordinary times. Not only are there multiple launch systems in development that are coming online in the next few years that are going to take humans to destinations throughout our solar system, but 3 of these launch systems are being developed by privately funded. So what is causing this shift from government to commercial endeavors? Well, it all comes down to increased access to space. Lower barriers to entry for new companies like we've seen in countless other industries. Reduced launch costs, miniaturization of technology are making space accessible to startups for the very first time. And while no doubt these exciting developments in human spaceflight are going to have a huge impact on the world in the very near future, space is already having a huge impact, significant and meaningful impact on the world today through constellations of small satellites. A question I'm often asked is, why spend money on space when we have real pressing needs right here on Earth. But it's not either or. Imagine if we had said the same thing about the printing press in the 15th century. I mean, why should the Roman Empire be investing in this new technology when they have real problems like the Black Death to deal with? The difference in approach is one of proximity. One is focused with the immediate needs on the ground, while the other is focused on addressing the issue from a point of global understanding and increasing empathy on a mass scale. Both are important. And what we're seeing today with small satellite constellations is similar to what happened with maps and the printing press in the 15th century. Humans have been mapping our world since we began carving on rocks 40,000 years ago. And in the 14th and 16th centuries, maps provided political power and extraordinary wealth. This enabled explorers to find their way and communicate their overseas conquests. And this information was tightly held by a few powerful people. And this privileged information was used to promote national and religious agendas. The same thing is happening today with small satellites, and they're being used to promote national and social agendas as well. For example, in 1885, Charles Booth applied wealth data to maps and discovered that abject poverty in London was much greater than previously thought. And he used this knowledge to influence government intervention against poverty. He contributed to the creation of old age pensions, free school meals for children, and popularized the idea of a poverty line. John Snow, in 1854, used maps to trace a cholera outbreak to a public water pump, and used this information to transform the waste and water management systems in the city. This was then applied to other cities and led to a general increase in public health worldwide. The same thing's happening similarly in space. Since the first satellite in 1957, this data from space has been tightly held by a few powerful governments. And they've similarly used it to promote national agendas. But with constellations of small satellites, this information is more widely distributed and breaking that established grip on power. And as more people get their hands on it, they're similarly using it to promote humanitarian, political, and social agendas and programs. Here are just a few examples. So there's a 20% chance that the fish you buy at the store or that you order at a restaurant is caught illegally. And the environmental costs of illegal fishing are enormous. And the economic costs are high too, estimated at $23 billion a year. A virtual watchroom in the UK is using satellite data to monitor our oceans, and they're using automated alerts to provide actionable intelligence. And their efforts have already led to the single largest marine reserve being established in the Pitcairn Islands. From our vantage point in space, we can provide solutions to real problems like hunger. Food production is already being improved through precision agriculture, which is enabled by satellites. This is leading to better farm management, ultimately higher crop yields and more food. The global refugee crisis has reached unprecedented proportions, with upwards of 65 million people forcefully displaced worldwide. And these images, taken from February to August, show just how quickly a camp in northern Uganda grew after fighting enraged in neighboring South Sudan in July. An analyst with Amnesty International said that satellite data gives them a way to visualize the invisible, a way to get their arms around the shifting situations on the ground. And there are countless other examples of how satellites are benefiting life on Earth today, from connecting billions of people to the internet, to allowing developing countries to leapfrog large infrastructure projects, ending illegal deforestation, and on and on. Space is important because it gives us a new perspective and brings us closer together. And our commercial endeavors in space are also important because they make space accessible to the general public. Perhaps if we can all have a better understanding of this big picture and gain this new perspective, we can find more effective solutions to the problems we face here on Earth. Thank you very much.